We couldn't have MLB DFS back without the tilt of opening day DFS, so hopefully we've gotten all the bad stuff out of our system and are ready to dig in once again to a 5-game slate today in Major League Baseball. Not a robust one, which is kind of annoying, but I do think there are some good plays. There's specifically one pitcher and one stack I really like here for today. We're going to dive into those, let you know what I'm seeing in my top plays across FanDuel for today in MLB DFS. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Friday's 5-game main slate with lock for 6:40 p.m. Eastern for today. Let's dig in here to the slate overview for today, take a look at what the weather is showing for us, and I would expect the roofs to be closed in both Seattle and Houston today because of the weather. There is a chance of rain in both those spots, so roofs likely closed with both those. Houston, it's about 80 degrees without the roof, or with the roof, without the roof, so big core there as a result. Seattle's actually super chilly, so it's probably a good thing the roof is closed in terms of hitting for today. Cooler temperatures as well in San Diego for the Padres and the Rockies, and then in Los Angeles for the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers. So weirdly, the West Coast cooler than the East Coast for today. Both those games in the mid-50s. I would downgrade hitters in both spots, but not to an extreme degree, and I do still like batters in those games. We'll talk about them in the stacking section for sure, but slight downgrade from the baseline due to the weather there. We'll dig in and talk about the top pitching options for today and also talk about stacks and more. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, because it's not just the solo shot here. We've also got the Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio. We got UFC on the Heat Check with Austin Swain whenever there are big cards. And then next week, Monday, the Masters via myself and Brandon Gadula. We'll be doing that actually live over on the FanDuel YouTube page as well. So you want to hear about the Masters, tune in over there, 3 p.m. Eastern, as we'll break down our thoughts on top guys in each salary tier for Augusta. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there is no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700. Or in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's dig into the pitching preview for today on this Friday main slate, where Christian Javier is the highest salary pitcher on FanDuel at just $10,100. So salary as a pitcher a bit lower for today. You've got Robbie Ray at 99. Lance Lynn is 95. Dustin May, fully back now, 93. Jesus Luzardo facing the Mets is 91. Merrill Kelly is 9,000 with David Peterson down at $8,300. Now, it's just 5 games here. We get an interesting dynamic where a lot of the offenses on this slate are low strikeout teams, which can make things very difficult because we don't want to target those teams with our pitchers in DFS. We want high strikeouts and a lot of them on both sides. But I do feel pretty good about Christian Javier against the White Sox here. This is a good matchup for a righty. The White Sox have a 95 WRC plus against righties and a 132 ISO. They're not a big strikeout team, but they also don't walk a whole lot, which is good for Javier because he has struggled with some walks, has struggled with fly balls, and that might not be as big of an issue here as it typically is. The rest of the profile for Javier is sick. He leaned more on his slider down the stretch last year. He had a 3.05 skill interactive ERA across his final 12 outings with a 32% strikeout rate. Both those numbers are the best marks of any pitcher on this slate in each guy's most relevant sample. Javier did that while letting up just a 32% hard hit rate, which also is best on the slate. When you line that all up, his ERA in that time was 1.79. I don't have a great read on pitch count here for Javier. He did go 76 pitches in his second to last start. He went 5 2/3 innings in his final one. So I have Javier down for 90 pitches here, which seems pretty fair. And we add that all up, it leads to a 6.66 projected strikeout number for Javier. That is almost half a strikeout more than anybody else on the main slate based on my numbers. So to me, that makes Javier the no-brainer top option for today. Feel good about his talent. Feel good about his matchup, at least the power side of things for the White Sox. And I think that things line up well here. So Christian Javier is my number one pitcher for today in daily fantasy. I'm going to put Dustin May second. There are higher strikeout guys on this slate than May, but most of those higher strikeout guys are facing very low strikeout teams. We'll discuss them and things to watch. And May is too, to an extent, but I know he is stretched out. He went 83 pitches in his final start in the spring, which is very good in terms of how long he was going. So I've got May projected for 92, which is a very nice number. I don't mind the matchup here from May. He's facing the Diamondbacks, who have a 99 WRC plus against righties based on what their current active roster did last year. They have a low fly ball rate. They have a low ISO. So again, they're not a huge strikeout team, but that's not as big of a detriment on this slate as it typically would be. May had some issues in his return from Tommy John last year. He had a 4.50 ERA in 6 starts, a 4.21 skill interactive ERA. So those weren't great, but he still induced a lot of ground balls. He got a lot of whiffs with a 12.9% swing and strike rate. So doesn't worry me too much that the results were not perfect there. May, pretty decent this spring too. So I think, again, maybe seeing some signs of what he did before Tommy John a couple years ago. I have May projected for 6.1 strikeouts. That ranks third on this slate. And when you combine that with his good ground ball rate, combine that with a matchup against a non-elite offense, I think that's enough for me to rank Dustin May number 2 at pitcher for today. Now, there is a value play I like for today, but he comes with plenty of risks. We talked about this with Hunter Green yesterday, where he can get you strikeouts, but he might let up runs. And Green had 8 strikeouts, but then got chased before 4 innings because he was letting up a lot of runs. So this is a very similar play to that, is what I would say. That guy's David Peterson. I'm going to put him third on this list, and he's my top value for today at 83. He's facing the Marlins, which is a great matchup for a lefty. This Marlins active roster, 82 WRC plus against lefties last year, a 121 ISO, and a 23% strikeout rate. I love all that in terms of what it does for the opposing pitcher. The concerns I have here are all about Peterson himself. He was in and out of the rotation last year. I did clinch the 5th spot in the rotation during spring training, but it wasn't great last year. And he was tinkering, trying to stabilize things, trying to figure things out. And over his final 15 outings, 13 of which were starts, he cut back in a sinker. And that was good because it did increase his strikeout rate to 31%, which ranks second on this slate among all starters. But he also let up a 48% hard hit rate, which is the highest mark on this slate. That's not a good thing to lead the slate in. The walk rate for Peterson was pretty high there as well, and the walks were present this spring too, which is concerning for me. I think the matchup does help him a lot in terms of facing a lower power team, not a team that's going to kill a lot of lefties. So I have Peterson projected for 6.2 strikeouts. That is second on the slate behind Javier, right in front of Dustin May, and I'm fine buying into that. So Peterson is extremely risky. I want you to make sure you're aware of that going in, knowing that this could go busto real fast. But I do think that Peterson is worth it in tournaments for the strikeout upside. So if you are okay taking on risk in DFS, which you have to be to play tournaments, I think that Peterson does make a lot of sense. And I prefer both Javier and May, even after considering salary, over Peterson. But I do think he is worth it here. And also it's partly because Robbie Ray, Jesus Luzardo facing lower strikeout teams. We'll talk about them in things to watch, but I think there is enough here to make David Peterson the number 3 arm on the slate. As far as stacks go for today, if Christian Javier is the no doubt about it top pitcher, the no doubt about it top stack is the Seattle Mariners. They're facing Hunter Gaddis tonight. I'm not sure how long Gaddis will go. There is some potentially winds up back in the bullpen for Cleveland, but I think the Mariners should be able to get to him here. Gaddis spent last year in AA and AAA. ERA in AA was 4.24. His ERA in AAA was 3.60. He did have very good strikeout numbers, but he also walked more guys than you like, and he let up a lot of fly balls. The ground ball rate for Gaddis in both AA and AAA was under 30%. Now, we did see him in the big leagues, better data in the big leagues and the minor leagues, and he made 2 starts there. But the fly ball rate there was 69% with a 56% hard hit rate. So it's a very small sample. I don't want to care too much about that, but when you add it on to what happened in the minors with the very high fly ball rate and the non-elite results, I think we can stack against him. We can be high on teams facing him until he gives us a reason to think otherwise. It's also easy to love this roster for Seattle, honestly. They have a 177 ISO against righties, a 113 WRC plus. I think they should hit for plenty of power. So they are the obvious top option for me. Within that stack, I think getting to Julio Rodriguez, very easy here because, again, pitching salaries not super high. Salaries in general are pretty lax this time of year. But the guy I want to get to outside of Rodriguez and build around is Colton Wong. Wong is $2,700, and there are 2 reasons why I like him. First one is I think he has underrated power against righties. He had a 211 ISO versus righties last year, but also 16 stolen bases. And his steals are going to be up this year, which they were in the spring and they were on opening day. Wong is going to be one of the guys who will benefit. So Rodriguez, the obvious top guy, you could argue he is the best play on this slate. I would not push back on that. I'd probably agree with you. But Wong, I think, should be a staple as well, especially when you consider how low his salary is. His spot in the batting order hit second behind Rodriguez last night. So Colton Wong, a focal point for me in DFS for today. So the Mariners top stack. I'm going to put the Padres second. They're facing Kyle Freeland, and Freeland had really good results outside of Coors Field last year. He had a 3.08 ERA on the road. Very good stuff. The underlying numbers not quite as flattering. The most relevant sample for Freeland was his final 14 starts where he threw fewer sinkers. And interestingly, throwing fewer sinkers, or throwing more sinkers, I should say. He threw more sinkers in those final 14 starts. And typically that improves your batted ball numbers. Did not do so for Freeland. He let up a 44% hard hit rate in that time with a 37% fly ball rate. His strikeout rate was low. It was 19%. That is the lowest on the slate by 2 percentage points. So he let up a lot of balls in play. He let up decent contact. And the Padres, pretty good against lefties, despite being a very lefty-heavy team. They have a 114 WRC plus on the current active roster with a 38% fly ball rate. So Freeland is not a guy I personally want to target often when he's on the road. But when we've still got a solid slate for pitching, it does become a bit tougher. So I think we have the leeway to stack against him here, despite the fact it's not a perfect situation by any means. Now, the one downside with the Padres, which I did allude to, is that they're a pretty lefty-heavy lineup, I would expect for tonight. So you will have to be okay with lefty-on-lefty matchups to stack them. Even among the righties, I'm not super itchy to use Nelson Cruz. Just a 134 ISO against lefties last year, 29% fly ball rate. He's not going to steal. Probably not going to get a lot of extra base hits outside of home runs. So I'm fine with going, ignoring Cruz, being lower on him, fine with going lefty on lefty, but just kind of prepare yourself mentally going in that you're going to have to use some left-handed batters against left-handed pitcher in the situation. So just, make sure you're aware of that. I'm fine with, Soto, obviously, other guys against the lefty, but just want to make you aware of that there will be some lefties in your lefty and lefty situations in your Padres stacks for tonight. I'm not super high on Nelson Cruz. I think we can check out the Dodgers for the third stack, especially with salaries being pretty relaxed this time of year. Dodgers facing Merrill Kelly. We saw Kelly pitch in the WBC, and he's generally a guy I respect. I've at times dabbled with him as a pitcher, as a value play in DFS, but we saw Kelly make some changes down the stretch last year that I thought were kind of odd, and I'm curious if he'll bring those changes over into 2023. Specifically, look at the final 7 starts for Kelly. He threw fewer sinkers and more cutters, and it does lead to more strikeouts, which is a good thing. But his batted ball data was pretty rough. He let up a 43% hard hit rate and a 43% fly ball rate, both of which are worse than the league average. Now, we could see Kelly reverse that because his results are pretty bad. So I would guess he's probably going to look at that and say, that didn't work. Let's change something here. But Kelly was never really a super high strikeout guy, not a guy with elite batted ball data. And it is a really tough situation here. Facing the Dodgers with a 120 WRC plus against righties, a 178 ISO, 40% fly ball rate. It's a very difficult spot for a pitcher to be in. That makes me feel good about the Dodgers, even if Kelly does go back to his old ways. So I think the Dodgers deserve to be the number 3 stack for today, behind the Mariners and the Padres. On this Dodgers team, in theory, you want to favor lefties against Kelly. In the past with the Dodgers, that'd be very easy because they had a lot of lefties. Not really the case now as much as it used to be. You know, they've had some guys leave. Seager, Bellinger's left, and Luck's getting hurt, stuff like that. They've lost some lefties. So I think only 3 guys are locks to be in there: Freeman, Muncy, and Peralta. As far as lefties, Peralta is very good. I would say if James Outman winds up playing once again, I could be intrigued. He got the start in center last night. He had a great game. He had 8th, but Outman, great power in the minors. He stole bases down there. Did strike out a decent amount, which could be a concern here, but I'm willing to use Outman even if he's lower in the order to get another lefty in this lineup. Not a full lock that he plays because we could see Chris Taylor get in there, but if Outman does play, I think that he's a pretty decent option for DFS for today. So focus on the lefties first, for the Dodgers. Consider Outman if he's down there, but just not quite as lefty heavy of a lineup as it used to be for the Dodgers. Things to watch. Did want to touch on Jesus Luzardo and Robbie Ray briefly because they're both very good pitchers. I love just really difficult spots for today. Luzardo's facing the Mets, just a 20% strikeout rate for them against lefties, 117 WRC plus. So that's tough. Ray's facing the Guardians. Their WRC plus against lefties not as high as the Mets, but the Guardians just an 18% strikeout rate against lefties. So it's pretty tough to get jazzed about guys facing those matchups. So I like both Ray and Luzardo and want to be on them eventually, but not as into them for tonight due to the teams they are facing. I don't think the Rockies are out of play for stacking. They're just not a great offense. They're facing Nick Martinez, who was not terrible as a starter last year, but he got moved to the bullpen for a reason last year. His skill interactive ERA was 4.27 before the demotion. So the Rockies suck. 87 WRC plus against righties. If they were better, I'd be probably a lot higher on them for stacking, but they're not. So maybe this is more of a spot for one-offs you can turn to. If there's some individual guys you like in the Rockies want to go there, put them in there along with your stacks of the better offenses. I think that could work, but it's tough to get too high on them given this is the case. Now it's a 10-game slate or a 5-game slate, which means that there are only 10 pitchers. The one we have not discussed yet, the only guy we have not discussed yet is Lance Lynn. Facing the Astros, I can't use Lynn as a pitcher due to the low strikeout rate of the opposing team, low strikeout rate that he had compared to guys like Javier and others last year. I would rather stack against him. Not super itchy to do that either, but it is warmer than it is for the Los Angeles and San Diego games in Houston with the roof closed. Great offense for the Astros, obviously. And I think that getting confirmation last night that Yordan Alvarez is healthy helped a lot. I always worry about hand injuries, sapping away power, but when he hit that home run, looked pretty good, looked pretty healthy there. So I think that does boost the Astros too. So I think the Astros were in play for stacking, but I very much prefer the 3 stacks we discussed in the Mariners, Padres, and Dodgers being the ideal plays for tonight. Let's finish up with some dinger calls here. And typically what I want to do is I want to give you a boring one and a fun one from different teams, kind of giving you a mindset of, okay, I'm looking at these teams as being the spots to turn to for home run calls, but I just want to go all in on the Mariners, given their matchup here with Gaddis. I think that given the fly ball rate that he allows, given the hard contact he allowed in a small sample last year, it makes sense. So the boring one is as boring as can be. Julio Rodriguez, very good. We'll go with him. Bold call, I know. The fun one, I will go Colton Wong. I think that he is a bit underrated in terms of his power against righties. So we'll take advantage of that tonight. Dive fully in and go Colton Wong. So home run calls for today, Julio Rodriguez and Colton Wong for the Mariners on our dinger calls. That is all that we have here for today on the solo shop, but a full slate of full suite of slates coming up next week. Nailed it. First time, no issues. That's going to be up next week. We'll be back with you every weekday, Monday through Friday, breaking down that day's main slate for daily fantasy baseball. So make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating because that does help us out a bunch. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups for tonight, and have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check, or the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.